Maybe they forgot he was coming.
I'm Tom Lurcher. I'm one of your state representatives. I live up a little bit further north in the district. We got the second worst district area-wise in the whole state. So
yeah,
it's a big
second
territory.
worst.
Well, I mean, it's the second worst in area size.
Oh, okay. Watch the
okay.
national
Worst
forest.
in that
400
respect.
miles long and 2 miles
Best
wide.
people, worst travel.
Is that Montpelier?
Yes, Montpelier.
Wow.
We have Montpelier. We have Soda Springs, Malad,
Goes all the way down to Idaho Falls,
and then well, I don't have any Idaho Falls. It's
just down to that.
just a little bit of the east of them and
Teton.
Teton County,
Yeah.
Swan Valley.
District 8.
District
The nice part of it is it's
That's worst.
So anyway, folks, thank you for coming out today. I'm going to be very brief because we've only got 30 minutes and I want to get into questions, answers, comments, whatever you want to say or ask. But just to let you know what I'm doing. About 3 years ago, I decided to do a town meeting in every town in Idaho. And so one of my staffers raised her hand and said, how about we start out with just the incorporated towns? So I said, okay. And that happens to be exactly 200 towns. And so we did that over the last, about 3 years ago we started. And so now we've finished that. And we've done 200 town meetings. I said, let's now do all of the unincorporated towns, because I want to go to every town in Idaho. So that's what we're doing now. And I think this is number 10 or 11 of the, there's about 175 of them, of the unincorporated towns.
How big are those unincorporated?
It goes all the way from, we think, 0. I just was at Conda.
Oh, yeah.
And
Soda Springs.
Outside Soda Springs, yeah.
Conda is, I think, 0. There is a pump station there.
Yeah.
And we toured the pump station and met with some of the folks that work there at the Simplot plant.
Oh, okay.
So it goes from 0 up to, I don't know, I think, what's the population of Thatcher? It's 100?
172.
172? So this is probably one of the bigger ones.
Some of them include the surrounding areas.
Yeah, and then you can draw from the surrounding areas as well. In fact, when we did the incorporated towns, I can't remember the name of it, but there was a town that the population was 37, I think. And we had about 70 people show up. So 200% attendance. So anyway, we hold them all times during the day and all days of the week except Sunday. And sometimes a lot of people show, and sometimes only 1 or 2 show. So, for a community this size, this is a good show. So it's good. With that, let me just say it's an honor to be here with you. I love representing Idaho. The people of Idaho have so much common sense that it just boosts my spirit and charges my batteries when I get to come out and visit with folks. And that's what I'm doing today. So I'll leave it at that, and let's just talk. If you want to ask me about what it's like to work with President Trump or whatever you want to ask.
Well, that's a good opening question.
Should I start with that? Let me answer that one. I wasn't on President. I did endorse President Trump toward the end of the cycle, but he wasn't one of those of the 17 Republicans who were running for president that I endorsed at the beginning. And I did have some problems with him, but eventually when he won the nomination, I said, look, we've got to elect President Trump. Look, I'm a conservative Republican, and I don't presume that you all are, but I thought there was no way we could elect Hillary Clinton, and so I supported her. I will tell you that I'm very glad he got elected, and I believe he's doing a very good job. One way that I often put it to folks is that I've spent most of the last 10 years fighting against really bad ideas and bad policies for the government and trying to stop what I consider to be a bad agenda. I've spent the last 14 months working on, I believe, a really good agenda and really good proposals. We haven't won them all because the margins are literally razor thin in the Senate. But we've won some big ones. We, in my opinion, saved the Supreme Court from sliding to what I would call an activist court, that it reinterprets the Constitution and put Justice Gorsuch in and restored the balance in the court. Now, I actually think that all 9 justices should be constitutionalists. We now have 4 that are constitutionalists and 4 that I consider to be activists, and 1 who is sort of swing vote. So it really is balanced. I hope that we get a chance to put another strong conservative on the court. But I think that single ballot, which is one we won, was one of the most important things that could have happened for our country. We also got the tax code reform. I've been working for over a decade to reform our broken tax code. And the package that we got put together wasn't exactly the way I would have done it, but it was mostly the way I think it should have been done. And I think will be a phenomenal boost to our economy and to our country in terms of just helping to build a strong economic base within which individuals and companies, whether they be partnerships, sole proprietorships, or corporations, can flourish. And we will stop the flight from America and actually start now the flight to America of companies wanting to be here and entrepreneurs wanting to start their new businesses here rather than looking to find it elsewhere. So I think it was a really positive thing. And a number of other things. We came within 1 vote of repealing and replacing Obamacare, but that's one we lost. That fight's not over. And we are working to reform our healthcare system. And I believe that though it will be more difficult than it should be, that we will get there. And then there's a ton of other things, good things that we're fighting for and working to achieve. And so I'm pretty happy about it. My answer to folks is, I am very glad to see the agenda that is on the table now in Congress and at the White House to be what I consider to be, for the most part, in fact, for the large most part, the right agenda. And now we just need to have the votes to implement it. One more thing I would say. President Trump said that he wanted to, on the regulatory explosion, because at a regulatory level, we have had an explosion of government in the last decade. Our Code of Federal Regulations has grown, or had grown, to almost 100,000 pages. And anybody in here who's doing business, or even working in any profession, knows the federal regulations that are coming in. And President Trump said he wanted to eliminate 2 for every 1 that was put in under his administration. So far, he has eliminated over 20 for every 1 that was put in, and the ones that he has put in have been much more reasonable regulatory provisions. And the number of pages in the Federal Register of Regulations has gone from 99,000 down to 67,000 in just a year. So there's been some good progress in a lot of different areas, and I hope we'll see more. So that's my answer to that question. Yes?
My perception is that if the crackdown on immigration continues, it's going to be really tough on Idaho agriculture. The same if NAFTA is dismantled.
Yeah.
So how can you get some traction to bring some balance to those arguments?
Very good points. First of all, let me start with trade and then move to immigration. On trade, I actually voted against NAFTA in the early 90s because I thought that it was badly negotiated. And I still believe it was badly negotiated, and there are parts of it that need to be fixed, and that's what President Trump is trying to do. So I agree with him in that. Having said that, NAFTA has now been the law of the land and has been something we've been implementing now for almost 20 years. In fact, more than 20 years. And it has done a lot of good things, particularly for agriculture. And we are in a good spot. It should be a better place we are in under NAFTA, and so I support trying to revise it and improve it. But I'm concerned about the possibility that the president has mentioned, or has stated that he may terminate NAFTA. I have actually met with him, with other senators, and encouraged him not to take that step, to continue his efforts to try to renegotiate it. And so I hope that he won't do that. I don't know whether he will or won't. As you know,
I mean, if you don't like the wallpaper in the living room, you don't burn down the house.
exactly. And so I'm in agreement with you on that, and I have advocated that way with the president. With regard to immigration, it's an interesting problem because we need to have the agricultural workers and other workers. And so we need a viable and robust guest worker program. It needs to be, and one of the reasons we have so much illegal, so many illegal entries into the country for agricultural work is because we don't have a workable guest worker program. And that's what you referenced. You referenced the enforcement of our current law. We need to fix our law.
It's really, I mean, our son-in-law works at a division of the University of Utah where there is a guy who is working for them, PhD in engineering. He has been trying for 5 years to get citizenship, and the way the law works, he is basically held hostage because if he quits that job, which is sponsoring his presence in the U.S., he starts over again at the bottom of the heap in the immigration process.
You know, it actually takes a person who follows the rules and tries to become a citizen in the legal way. 5 years is actually a short period of time.
Well, he's been at it
He's not
5
there
years,
yet.
and he's like 6 years from making it to the top
Yeah,
of the
it
heap.
takes at least 10 years, and some people are putting in 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 years to follow the rules. And that's another reason that we have this problem. So we need to fix it. Now, I do believe that America is a nation of law, and we need to protect our rule of law. And I don't believe that those who have illegally entered the country should be given a benefit toward permanent residence or citizenship because of that illegal act, where they try to go around the line and get in front of the line and frankly broke our law doing so. But we can solve it without violating those principles of law. Most of those who are seeking to work in our agricultural economy are not as focused on citizenship as they are on a valid legal guest worker status to work. And we can solve that. That's what I think we need to get done in Washington. And many of us believe that and are fighting to do that.
Well, I wish him all the luck in the world.
Thank you.
On that subject, I was a manager in Los Angeles, and I had half of my crew at IBM. They were green cards. They were residents.
Yeah, they were doing it the legal way.
Right, exactly. And I kept asking them. I mean, we have from Aruba and Mexico, all over the place, England. And I kept asking them. I said, "Why don't you become an American citizen?" He says, "Because when I retire, I want to go back to my home country to be with my relatives and have my Social Security because they pay everything except vote."
Yeah.
And so, isn't that an avenue for these folks who are here? That they want to do the right thing, but can they expand that, or are those rules broken?
The process for a person to have a legal green card status as a worker.
Yeah, permanent resident, correct?
Yeah, it's a green card is basically permanent residence. It's actually a track towards citizenship.
Yes.
For those who want to.
But some of them don't want to.
Yeah, some don't want to.
Right.
And the process for those who want to work but not seek citizenship you asked if it was broken. I guess that's probably a good word to use for it. It's incredibly difficult and it doesn't work well.
Okay.
And that's one of the reasons we have people illegally coming into the country.
Well, these people were incredibly talented. I mean, really
Yeah, very
talented.
talented.
I mean, they had skills you couldn't imagine. I mean, really.
And let me tell you another part of our law that's, I think, broken. And that is, we have the best universities and educational system in the world, I believe. And we educate many people who come in and get a legal status, a visa status, to attend our universities. But when they're educated, they get their degrees, and then they're going to go out and be the entrepreneurs or the scientists or what have you. We tell them they can't stay.
Yeah, that's dumb.
You're out. We have a very limited process, a number of visas that we allocate to those who are in that category. And that, I can't remember the speed at which it's used up, but it's used up in, I think, hours, not days.
Do you support DACA?
Now, the DACA situation it needs to be repaired. We probably do, and I think that there's broad agreement on this across both parties right now. We do need to provide for a provision for those who have come here historically, who were brought as young children and have never known another country. We need to provide a pathway for them to become citizens. But it shouldn't be just an amnesty pathway. There need to be some requirements imposed. But I think that part is, everybody agrees on. The battle that we're having in Washington over DACA is, you may recall a few years ago, President Obama, just by executive order, changed the enforcement of the immigration laws and allowed unaccompanied minors to come into the United States and receive legal status. And then we just had literally thousands and tens of thousands of children were brought to our borders and delivered to us in the United States. And that process of just having that happen needs to be addressed so that we have, again, a legal process by which people, whether they are children or adults, come into the United States. And that has even been addressed. I mean, there's legislation to fix that, which both parties agree to, for the most part. But in addition to that, President Trump has asked for 2 other immigration changes, which I agree with on both scores. One is to build the wall, and when we say the wall, what I mean when I say that is not necessarily an entire wall over every inch of the border, but to secure the border. And where it needs a wall, yes, where it needs other types of security, whatever that may be. And we actually have very extensive studies showing exactly what we need to do at the border, and we need to do that. And he's asking for that. And the other thing he's asking for is to end chain immigration, which is once a person becomes a citizen, they can bring in their relatives, both up and down. Now, down is not so much a problem because their relatives will probably be citizens anyway, because they'll be their children born in the United States. But up, you can go up to parents and grandparents and their siblings and their parents and grandparents and their siblings, and it keeps going. And so his proposal, which I think most of us on the conservative side agree with, is to allow parents, but not to allow it to explode after that. And instead, to have a system that in a more orderly fashion allows people from different countries and expand the visas available to those who have been educated here, and to look at other ways to fill up the quotas for immigration into the country. And those 2 issues, the border security and the chain immigration issue, are issues that the Democratic Party opposes, or at least won't let be attached to DACA. And so the battle that we had like 4 votes on DACA, all of them failed for various reasons, but the main reason was that we could not get agreement on both sides to just do a DACA fix. There were other fixes that were insisted on being included, and those killed the bill.
Well, I'm a veteran, and I read where there's 11,000 spouses of the military serving that are undocumented, and they're really concerned about these young people that are serving in the military, but then they're married to undocumented spouses, and it's 11,000.
Yeah, there's a big number. And
I was surprised at the number. It was incredible.
Those married to a U.S. citizen actually have a better pathway, though it's not an easy pathway.
But they were undocumented that came here without that pathway, correct?
Yeah, and when they come into the country illegally under our law, there's a 10-year penalty.
Right, that's exactly.
So,
are you going to fix that? Or?
Well, if we end up getting a more orderly system that I've been discussing here, I think that provision will be addressed.
What about birthright citizenship? Or, as I understand, we have 2 fairly flourishing businesses. On the East Coast, Russian women coming and giving birth in the U.S. so that children will be able to have an American passport and citizenship. On the West Coast, Chinese.
I personally believe, first of all, our Constitution, I believe that the interpretation our Supreme Court has given to our Constitution is that those children are citizens. I believe that we should amend the Constitution to make it very clear that a person who is brought in that way, who is born here through a strategy by someone who is illegally here should not get...
They're legal, they come in on a tourist visa.
Right, but not a citizen, and they are not a permanent resident.
Right.
And I believe we should address that question.
Because,
We call them anchor babies.
Yeah, thank you.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so I believe we should not allow that practice.
That's the 14th Amendment.
But we will have to change our constitution to do so.
Because especially you see these kids, okay, mommy goes home, they're raised in Russia or in China,
Oh, yeah.
and they have an American passport,
Then they've got the American connection.
and they are 25 or 30 years old and bilingual, and
then
the
through...
simple intelligence and espionage possibilities are hair-raising.
Understood, and then make that connection to chain immigration that I just discussed. Once they are citizens, then they can legally, under our law, bring in a significant number of others, which we don't have the ability to control. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't have other people come in from that country. What I'm saying is that we should decide how that works, rather than allowing it to be totally dominated by these kinds of transactions.
Open and close the door.
You're right.
Well, 40%, I read somewhere that they say that their visas, they come in for 6 months to support somebody that we want, and they get a visa that's supposed to expire in 6 months, and they're supposed to go home, but they
And
don't.
they overstay. Yeah, you've heard this number, there's some number of
Yeah.
10, 12, 15 million people in the United States illegally. So I don't know the percentage, but a very big percentage of that number is people who came here legally
Right.
and then have overstayed their visas
Right.
and have refused to leave according to the visa
So
requirements.
how do we address that?
Well, we have to, I believe we have to enforce our laws
Yeah.
and enforce those people to return to their country as they should. However, if we do fix our guest worker program so that we provide basically a guest worker status, and that's what they want to do, I would agree to let them move into that guest worker status, which is then, it brings them into a legal status and to a legal system, which is not a permanent residency, and so they go through then a process of reacquiring that legal status.
Something's gonna be done.
I worked in Salt Lake at the Parks Department,
Uh-huh.
and every year they start now hiring people to do the parks.
Yes.
And I was one of the ones that was, gave them their applications to fill out. I would not fill out the applications for the people who did not speak English. There was one girl that did. But my question is, or my thing is, we had one guy that came in there with he had three different driver's licenses. And every year he came in with a different driver's license.
Different one.
And finally my boss she was not aware of this, and finally my boss had to come down and say, we cannot and will not hire you ever again.
Yeah, and it's, there is it's just, how do I put it? There's a phenomenal number of creative minds looking for ways to work through the system and bypass it, which gets right back to the first question. We have to, I believe our immigration laws need to be enforced, but they also need to be revised and improved so that we are much more efficiently and effectively dealing with the question of immigration. This is a land of immigrants, and we need to have a workable, meaningful immigration process for our country. It's just the one we've got now is broken.
But they also need to learn to speak English, because
I agree with that.
for translation, we either had to have somebody come from their house, like somebody that was in grade school or middle school, and translate for them, or we had to get a translator because we had no idea what they were saying.
Yeah.
Different dialects from different parts.
Yeah.
And this issue, none of you have mentioned sanctuary city or sanctuary county or state issues, but the issue there's different than the news media tends to report it, in my opinion. The question that is really the core of that battle is when a person who is illegally in the country commits a crime, and we're mostly focused on serious, either drug crimes or violent crimes, and they are arrested for that crime by a city or a county. And so they're sitting in the city jail or the county jail for drug dealing or for murder in some cases, or different things like that. And it's determined that they are not legally present, then federal law requires that they be turned over to the federal government, and that they be processed for their illegal presence. And the sanctuary cities are refusing to do that, and actually releasing them most of the time, just releasing them. And you know, you've probably heard in the news of some of the stories where some people have committed literally murder and violent crimes multiple times.
And doesn't the court system take care of that? I mean,
well, on the murder cases, they do, because they keep them in triumphant murder.
Okay.
Although, what happens in the lead up to that is there's usually multiple crimes like drug dealing or manslaughter or things like that where they plead out or something happens and they're
aren't they checked as far as their citizens when they commit the first crime?
Yeah, they are. And so it's known and they are required in the first crime. It's federal law requires that they turn them over to the INS. And they don't. That's what the sanctuary city issue is that we're trying to deal with. I just got the sign, we've got 5 minutes left. The questions never end before 30 minutes. Yes.
Okay, well, this will be my last question. Okay, the tax reform in December.
Yeah.
And Orrin Hatch was given the kudos for introducing that as the architect by Mr. Trump, President Trump. Right after that, there was analysis that said that we were going into debt, $1.5 trillion, and then later on, the debt was raised to $1.5 trillion. Now, I noticed on your debt, in your website, you have the clock, the debt clock, and yet every person in the Republican Party voted for that $1.5 trillion debt.
I'm glad you asked. Because that's not correct. I mean, it is correct that attack has been made.
Yeah, but I understand it. Well, is it all these independent folks that are saying this stuff? And I noticed.
Here's what it is.
Okay, that's my question.
Here's what the deal is. Let me start out with, our economy has been in the doldrums for a decade. We have not grown at higher than 2% for 10 years. The average is 1.9% for the last 10 years. We cannot sustain that kind of low growth rate in our economy. I said earlier that our tax code has been broken. It's terribly broken, and it is one of the real reasons for that. We've had flight from America, and we now need to have capital formation come to America. So when we put together a bill, we have an organization called the Congressional Budget Office.
Yeah, that's independent, right?
It's non-partisan.
Okay.
And so, but it is subject to Congress. They have unbelievably obtuse rules that they use to evaluate legislation. They are wrong 100% of the time. But here's what they did on this tax bill, and this is what their rules require them to do. They're required to score this tax bill by assuming that it has no impact whatsoever on anybody's activity. In other words, assume that it doesn't impact the economy and human behavior. And they also are required to assume current law. And this gets a little complicated, but those two assumptions, using those two assumptions, they said this tax bill is going to reduce tax income, and therefore it's going to be over 10 years, $1.5 trillion of tax income will be lost.
That's a lot.
It is. It's also wrong.
Oh, it's not the 1%. The corporations and the wealthy didn't get the tax breaks.
Let me get to that question after I answer this.
Yeah, okay.
A set of what are called tax extenders that are renewed every year and will be renewed every year, and they should have been counted in. If you counted that in, then $500 billion that they said was going to be lost will not be lost. So instead of $1.5 trillion, it's really $1 trillion under their. Hold on. If they are assuming that the economy will grow at 1.9% for the next 10 years, we are assuming, and many economists will validate this, that this tax bill will actually stimulate economic activity and that the economy will start to grow back in its more normal ranges again.
And what range is that, sir?
Okay, the average rate of growth for the economy of the United States for the last 50 years, including the 10 years at 1.9% and all of the other times when we've had dips, the average is 3.2%. So if we just got back to average, we would be 1.2% higher. Now, if we get back not to 3%, if we get to 2.4%, if we have basically a 0.5 percentage growth in our economy, then that entire $1.5 trillion is erased. If we get to 0.6% growth, we're adding revenue and reducing the debt. Today, we are at 3%. So the estimates of the Treasury Department are that over the next decade, with the changes we've made in our tax code, that we will hit 2.9% or 3%. And they consider those to be conservative estimates. So my point is, the news latched on to that CBO report that assumed that no human being will change their conduct by our changing this law. And the truth is that phenomenal changes in conduct are already taking place because of our change in this law. We've made America competitive globally again. And instead of you reading in the news about how many American businesses are inverting and moving outside or being gobbled up in a hostile takeover from another company, you're seeing that come to America now. So anyway, it's a battle over predictions. And the $1.5 trillion prediction, I think, is 100% false. I believe the prediction that we will beat 2.4% by a lot is the one that's more accurate. And if we just get to 2.4, it's a wash.
I hope so.
Senator, we got time probably.
Okay, I gotta answer a second question. Does all this tax relief go to the so-called wealthy? There's two pieces of it, the corporate side and the income side. And I'll finish with this. I'm sorry, I gotta run. On the individual income tax side, every single person in America who pays taxes, well, let me put it this way. Every single income cohort, starting at 0 and going up by 10,000 increments, 0 to 10, 10 to 20, 20 to 30, all the way up to the wealthiest. Every category gets a reduction of their taxes. The people in the lowest and middle categories, basically from 0 to about 150,000, will get the biggest percentage of reduction. The average for the so-called middle class, which let's just say it's 50,000 to 100,000. The average for that level is somewhere around 6% reduction. The level for the wealthy is a 1% reduction. So, if you look at it on a percentage basis, the middle class gets the biggest percentage of the cut.
And what is the middle class there?
Well, I just said 50 to 100. You can look at it in any different increment you want.
Yeah, it's average in Idaho is like 48,000.
Yeah, and those under 50 get even better. In fact, most people under 50,000 pay a very low tax rate. People under 25,000 get paid money rather than paying into the tax code. But the wealth at the upper end of America's society has so much wealth that a little 1% help to them is bigger in dollars by a lot of dollars. And that's what the attackers use to attack. And right now, I guess I would justify the decisions that were made there. I mean, I could have been okay if we just didn't get any tax relief at that level, but that's not how the battle ended up.
You're only one of 100.
That's right. But this you need to understand too. If you look at the top 5% of wealth in the United States, they pay way more than 50% of all taxes. And probably, I don't remember the number, but it's more like 70% of all taxes. Because we've already pushed the relief down in the income categories very aggressively. Under this bill, that top 5% will pay a higher percentage. I don't know what it will be, what it is, but whatever it is, they will actually pay a higher percentage of all taxes under this bill than they did before this bill. So even though they'll get some relief because the taxes are going down, the revenue is going to go up because we'll stimulate economic activity. I know it's kind of a complicated, but that's the answer.
You lost me. Yeah, but this still is the borrowing of the 1.5 trillion, raising the debt.
Yeah, and so that's not gonna happen.
It didn't happen, though?
No, it didn't happen.
Oh, it hasn't happened yet?
No, this, I don't know what the 1.5 trillion you were talking
I
about.
realize once you get to a trillion, you know, a trillion here.
Yeah, I don't believe that the debt went up by $1.5 trillion
Okay,
overnight.
okay, whatever it was.
If it did, it had nothing to do with this bill, because this bill, that projection was a 10-year projection. And so even if it had happened the way the CBO said it would, we'd only be in 2 months into the 10-year period. But 2 months into the 10-year period, we're already raising, the economy's already performing at above what it needs to perform at for the bill to be revenue neutral. I'm sorry, I love talking about this stuff, but I've got to go.
Can I get a picture?
Oh, sure.